So, folks, that stream link should be active now. That's up on the Discord. Um, Again, hopefully, I think what I could do is actually schedule these through their time slots. I think it'll be easier just jump into them at that stage. I think I'll have to test some of that stuff out. But today, what we're going to be looking at is materials. So we're going to be looking at last week. Obviously, we did particles. This week, we're going to look at materials, and we're kind of just trying to cover our bases in terms of it, like a broad understanding of the Unreal Engine and how it works. So I'm going to launch. This is like really bad ergonomics for a lecturer position. And I'm just going to launch the particles project from last week and then hit open project. Okay, cool. So this is, if you remember from last week, this is our project basically from last week. Okay, so the boss is going, yeah. So what I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to create a new level just so that we can kind of test out our materials in isolation and not have other stuff getting in the way. So I'm going to create a new level. Default. I'm going to pick like time of day here. So I think we can press play. I'm just going to press play on this and see everything's there. Cool. Oh. Oh no. I did not expect that. But that basically is our. This is where we're going to be starting off. I'm going to delete this, just this bit of text, and I'm going to delete this thing out. And I'm just going to put in some of these shapes. I might create these as geometry, just in case we want to like make these nicer at some stage. It's maybe handy to create them as geometry because we'll be able to go in and edit the brush and stuff. So what I'm going to do first is start creating materials actually. And I'm going to create a material and I'm going to call it green. And double click it, it's going to open up a new material window. And I'm going to actually dock that. I like to dock all the tabs like here so that I can see them. So at the moment, this is our like material node. This is like the default node you're going to have for different materials. And it just kind of shows you what the material, what inputs the material can have. And at the minute, there's nothing, so it's basically just like this nothingness sort of color. So this first green we're going to set up as a pretty simple green diffuse. And I'll show you a couple of different settings we can change on it if we want to make it like shiny or something like that. Or actually, maybe we'll just make the green, we'll make the green completely unshiny, basically. And the first thing we want to do here is to create color. We're going to use a vector tree. Why do you think we use a vector tree to do this? Yeah, Adam?
They both have two values.
Yeah. So it's basically the tree values RGB are represented in our vector tree. Does that make sense? Cool. So if we start typing, it's actually, if you start typing const, it's going to give you constant tree vector, and constant tree vector. Okay, select constant tree vector and attach it there to that first node, which is the base color. It doesn't really change anything until we change the constant value here by clicking on the little color selector. We can change this. We said it was going to be green. Cool. Okay? Yeah. So that's a good question. I think a constant 1 I think will give us a grayscale, but we'll try that out and see. Yeah, so that's giving us grayscale between black and white, basically. Now, constant 2 is constant 2 vector. Let's see what this does. It might just completely not like it. It gives us some red and green channels. But yeah, that's what that does. So we can. Okay, I'm just going to delete this one. I'm going to keep the constant because I'm going to use it in a second. So that's our base color. It's green. I'm going to attach this constant just to. If you type in constant, it just creates a constant, like basically a float value you can edit and tweak. And I'm going to attach this to the roughness, which I think that's roughness, isn't it? And let me zoom out a little here. As this value approaches 0, sorry, I'm going to type in 0 here. So you see at 0 roughness, basically, we have like a kind of smooth, polished surface. Does that make sense? And at 1 roughness, we have basically a very, like it's, roughness here means like surface roughness, so this is like perfectly matte versus perfectly gloss. Does that make sense if I say gloss and matte? Yeah. Matte is like a ping pong ball. You know the way a ping pong ball is kind of like the light hits it and it doesn't have any like shiny spots. And then perfectly gloss or like a 0 on the roughness is like a pool ball or a billiard ball or something like that. Like it's perfectly shiny. Does that make sense? Okay, that's our value between 0 and 1. I'm gonna, that green is disgusting, so I'm gonna change it slightly and make it a bit more green. Even that looks a bit better. I'm gonna hit apply and save. Just to make my life easier, with this selected, I'm going to create a cone. And because that material is selected, it should by default apply that material to the cone. Okay? That's our material, it's kind of completely flat. I'm going to create another material. Right clicking, material, and I'm going to call this red. I probably want to be more descriptive here, like making clear that like this is going to be red and shiny basically. Same process. We want to get our base color, which is a constant vector 3. Base color. I'm going to put a constant. And I'm going to attach this to the. Oh, I'm going to attach it to the roughness first. And I'm going to change the color to like a reddish. Okay, so we've got a really like perfectly shiny red. We can also change the metallic, which is kind of going to give us something similar to the surface shininess. You generally, I think you'd only really need one of these. I don't think it makes too much of a difference to have 2 of them. We can see if we change this value to 1. Yeah. So I'm going to leave that at 0 because I want this to be a red shiny ball, and I can break this link. Hit apply, save, and I'm going to create a sphere. Yeah. The default geometry is fairly low pixel, but that's too small. So we'll go with that size. Okay, and we can see here, actually what I'll do is move this. I'm going to turn off the scale snap here. That is scale snap, isn't it? Yeah. So there we have one of the little baubles on this tree, and we can press play and see how this looks. Oh, what did I hit there? Oh, I am. Sorry, I didn't even see that. Cool. So there's our little thing we created. So yeah, that's basically that. That's our like shiny material. We've created a matte material. The next kind of material we're going to create is a diffuse. So I'm going to right click the. I'm going to click add import here and material, and it's down here somewhere. And I'm going to call this glowing. Now I'm going to use here a constant tree vector for this, and this is going to be the emissive color. And say I set this color to like a warm sort of orangey color. Okay, and we'll see it starts glowing a bit like that. Now, I'm also going to create a constant here and attach this and show you what happens if you have a constant as the emissive color. And I'm going to set this as the base color. So as I change this value on the emissive color, it's going to start glowing more and more. You can see it starts glowing a bit. As we increase this number, it glows even more. That might be too much. Too much. But let's go like somewhere around there. Still too much. There we go. Okay, so the higher this this emissive value, the more it's gonna like glow and shine basically. Can anyone see a problem with this at the minute? There's definitely, yeah, it's white. It's a big issue. Basically, we wanted this to be this color, and instead we're getting a white emissive. If you remember last week, I think we used multiply. So we can multiply this base material, this base color, by our emissive amount, and use that to set up our emissive color. And now we get a nice, bright sort of glowy ball. Obviously, this is still way too strong. So cool. Let's go with that. Save. And let's create another sphere. Okay, I'm gonna switch to top view for this. So folks, as before, sometimes we have to switch to a couple of like side views to see exactly where this is going at. So let's go something like that. And if I go back to perspective now, so there we've like the little light kind of glowing on our tree. Where's our directional light here? And we can change this. This one? Oh, yeah. Good. So folks, as I rotate this, we can change the time of day in this map. And let's see what it looks like as a night scene. Yeah, and so this is one of the things, it does cast light, and it will, you can see there it's casting the reflection on the gun and stuff. Can you see that being picked up? So it will cast like reflections. Does anyone know why the tree isn't catching any of the reflected light? Yeah, because the roughness is basically up to 1, basically it's not going to pick much up. So even if we turn that down a little bit, up here. So instead of 1, let's go like 0.75. And we should see as we get a bit closer. It's kind of hard to see it, but it's just reflecting a tiny bit more there on it. Okay. What is this the light? We can go for something like that, maybe a nice kind of there. Good. So it's like it's sunrise on Christmas morning. So that's our basic materials. Okay, we've made materials that are emissive, that will emit light. We've made ones that are shiny and ones that are matte, basically. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, so there is. I just haven't. Let me just check. Let's go for. Let me get back. I just want to check exactly the way to do that before I go setting that up, if that's okay. So yeah, we'll look at like how to do random maybe in the second session. So that's our like basic sort of material structures, but there's also then we can move on for these materials that are just plain colors to ones that have textures and material. On Brightspace, where is this? That's the wrong one. On Brightspace for game tools, there's a download here. It's a set of textures from opengameart.org. Okay, it's just some textures you can download if you want to use them to follow along. So I have those textures here. I'm going to just select all of these and bring them in. And just drag and drop. Have you all seen these sort of bluish textures before? Do you know what they are? Yeah, so they're all kind of UV maps. What these are called is normal maps. Have you ever heard of normal mapping? Okay. What normal map does is, if we look at this is like an image, like a flat image shown like these cutouts. The normal map basically contains height data for the texture. That's going to allow us to decide like how deep these kind of cracks are. A general rule of thumb in like 3D modeling or textures and stuff like that is, if the gap is like bigger than you could fit your hand into, you want to model that gap. If it's smaller, you want to use a UV map for it. Okay, that might be slightly different with like UE5 because it's got this crazy scaling stuff. But with current technology, that's kind of the way we look at it. So I'm going to create a new material here. I'm going to call it ground. Now I'm going to open it up. So the first thing I'm going to do is create instead of a constant, I'm going to set a texture sample. I'm going to collect the RGB of the texture sample to the base color. Okay, with this texture sample connected, over here on the left hand side, I can set a texture. And I'm going to go ground 0, 1. And I'm going to switch this, because a ball actually isn't that useful to me here. I'm going to look at this as a flat plane. Okay, and can you see how like kind of flat and uninteresting that looks? Like it doesn't look very well at the moment. So I'm going to create another texture sample. And this time I'm going to connect it into normal, which is here. And instead of texture none here, I'm going to change this to ground 01 underscore NRM, which stands for normal. And you should see here, okay, that's got some additional depth in it, but it's kind of hard to see. And it doesn't look that much different. So what we're going to want to do is do the same thing as before. We're going to create a multiply. Our texture sample, we're going to multiply that by a constant. And now we can change the slider up. Okay, and you should be able to see there that the texture starts to become kind of, starts to look slightly deeper. Can you see there, like there's sort of detailing and stuff there? It no longer looks completely flat, basically. I'm going to hit apply and save. And here's our ground material. I'm going to apply it to the ground. And if we press play, can you see there the normal map is picking up like there's little shadows and stuff in the ground? Can you see that effect? Like it doesn't look perfectly flat, basically. Are you able to see that there? Yeah, so like if you look here, right? Let's say this here is catching the light in, whereas you can see there's gaps where there's little bubbles in it. It is like, it's subtle enough on this texture map. We can try and increase the numbers. So I'm just gonna, where is this material? I'm gonna drag this just onto this screen and try change that value of it. Oh. So as we change it, so I'm going to set this to 0. Yeah. Can you see the difference with no? That's with the constant set to 0. If I set it to, I'm going to set like minus 100. Okay, and minus 100 is doing the opposite. It's pushing it downwards basically, so it'll look extra kind of flat. And now if I set it to 100, and there you can see it picks up the detail of it. Does that make sense? It actually, like, it's a big effect, but you don't notice it that much until you see it not there, basically, and it looks really flat without it. So, yeah, how do you make a normal map is a great question. There's a few different ways. One way is like whatever 3D modeling software you're using, you can get to render out a normal map if you've got like a high poly sculpt or something like that. If you're using a tool like Substance Painter, it will also give you a normal map, or like it might actually use a different type of map, but like a similar type of theme. And then the other way is there's an NVIDIA plugin for Photoshop that's called Normal, like it's like NVIDIA Normal Map or something. Or it might be Intel, it's one of those two. And you can basically put a picture in and it'll try and figure out what the normal map would be. It does a reasonable job of it. One of the things is in Unity, if you just stick an image into the normal map channel, it will like convert that image to a normal map, basically. It'll do a default conversion of it. So that you get like the sort of extra details. Okay. So and like we can start looking at how like this would affect different things as well. Like we could look at like let's say the individual green channel of this. If that becomes our base color, it's only going to pick up on areas that are slightly green. So then for blue, they'll look a bit different, and red there might be less of a. It might be huge. We can let's see what would happen if we tried to do this as if we did another multiplying constant here, and we use this as an emissive color. And let's see how emissive ground looks in our scene. Yeah, emissive will affect the like height map and stuff as well. You can see there it kind of makes the ground kind of glowy, but it affects the ability of the light to actually reflect on it and stuff. Weird camera distortion there. Cool. So these are kind of basic tools. What we might do is take a break there. For the lab, I'm going to be asking you mainly to just like create like a little Christmas scene or kind of whatever scene you want with some custom materials to create like a nice sense of like environment, basically using materials and lighting. One thing I might do at that stage is just look at like the kind of randomizing and kind of some of the more dynamic stuff we can do with materials, but I'll also link to some resources on that because it's not necessarily that straightforward either. Okay. When you're creating the block mesh for this module for the project, all you need is like default materials. You don't have to have textured materials. You don't need anything too detailed. But let's say you have like a key in your level. You might want to like give that a kind of glowing yellow material just so that the player can see it. Does that make sense? Locked doors, you might want them just to be a red material, that sort of thing. Just kind of simple materials is fine. The other thing, folks, is the level design documents. I've only done like an initial look at them. I haven't like reviewed them yet, and Jeff has them at the minute and is providing feedback. That'll probably be about a week or two before he gets his feedback. Overall, one thing to say is that the standard was really high. Like there was a lot of really interesting levels and really interesting designs, and like I think it wasn't just like people trying to create interesting spaces, but also interesting gameplay within those spaces and kind of creative environments and stuff like that. So well done on that, folks. It's really interesting to see that work being done. The other thing is, I'd mentioned this to Baz that like tomorrow, if any groups for the Aora project need support, just drop me a DM on Discord and we'll arrange a time to meet up tomorrow, okay? And I'll like jump into a Discord call with your group and kind of help you through any issues. That call can be tomorrow or Friday, but we'll arrange a time basically if that's it, okay? Because I know some people are showing with some of the AR stuff. Is everyone using Vuforia? No. What are people using? AR Foundation. And AR Core, is it? I don't know AR Foundation. AR Core I've seen, but I haven't worked with much. I can hopefully help people with Euphoria a bit more. If it's AR core, I'll do my best to help, basically. Okay?